Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special Meet the Real Leaders event. I am Julie Van Ness, President of Real Leaders Media, and I am delighted that you're joining us here today. As some of you already know, we have been hosting these events on a regular monthly basis. So if you missed anything today in the opening slides, we will be posting it on our website and also throughout the duration of the event. We have two simple housekeeping rules. One, please mute your phones and your Zoom microphones. Please also keep your video on for the duration of the event, because if we can't see you, unfortunately, we'll have to end your participation. And lastly, please type in the chat box where you're coming in from. It's always great to see the global audience in motion. And now I'd like to introduce to you our founding editor, Brant Schreiber, who will be asking all of the fantastic questions. Brant?
Thank you, Julie. And I'd like to welcome Lord Michael Hastings, CBE, to Meet the Real Leaders today. Lord Hastings is the former global head of corporate citizenship for KPMG International and was previously the BBC's head of public affairs and then the first head of corporate responsibility. He is currently the Chancellor of Regent's University London and Professor of Leadership at the Stephen R. Covey Institute, Huntsman Business School, Utah State University. He has helped formulate policies in the UK for developing inner cities. He is a vice president of UNICEF and a governor of an academy in Nairobi, Kenya, that develops young leaders. Lord Hastings is passionate about the future of business and especially whether it can survive the paradigm shift to social impact and thereby become secured for the long term. Having worked with some of the world's leading brands and organizations, I'd now like to ask him to explain to us how we can strengthen the markets and our businesses through social impact. Lord Hastings, welcome.
Thank you very much indeed. Great to see you. And thank you so much, Grant, for having me with you.
Great. And so I'd like to just ask you to start off, there's been a huge rise in social impact over the last few years. Why is that important for business today?
It's an amazing change that has taken place in the course of the last decade in particular. Business has woken up to the reality of the climate pressure that we're all now talking about. If we aren't experiencing it because of the dramatic shifts in weather, we're immensely aware of the responsibility that we're all in because of our abuse of plastics, our waste, our energy consumption, the need to be responsible, and the need for business to provide the effective outcomes and solutions. It may be for government to provide frameworks of regulation and control and set boundaries, but it's going to be business which not only provides energy and vehicles and systems, but it's going to be for business to provide sustainable solutions. So, of course, thank goodness business has woken up to the fact that being sustainable, therefore being responsible, therefore being pro-planet, isn't just about being good. It is actually effectively about being profitable. It's about building for the next future that has to come. I think that awareness has begun to shape other policies that business has been keen to adopt. It was Walmart in the United States that was the first major business to adopt a living wage. I'm proud to say that KPMG in the United Kingdom was the first business in the City of London to adopt a living wage, which then spread to the rest of the professional service world and to the city world and the banks and the financial institutions. Walmart was the first in the United States to do that. This change of attitude towards how you employ people, how you remunerate people, how you support people, their human rights, their dignities. Walmart, again, the first to actually say members of its staff team the right to go and vote and to take time out to vote, but also explaining to people why it's important to vote. So you match the climate awareness with the responsibility for people and this consciousness that business is now in a different era altogether. Profit is essential, no question about that. Nobody disputes that. But profit with purpose is the way in which we're going to shape a meaningful future.
Perfect. A lot of people like to think that this is a nice add-on and it still borders on charity and philanthropy. So what success stories have you seen in the corporate world where this has been applied and become a profitable solution for them?
You know, the thing is, I firmly believe that the starting point of how a business engages with this agenda is not to say, how are we going to maximize our profits because we're being responsible, sustainable, humane, more committed, more caring to our people, more motivating of us. It's not to begin there, but I realize that finance directors, those responsible for shareholder relationships and investors, are going to ask, but come on, if you go down this road of public commitments, which the Business Council of America firmly made just 2 years ago, the first time ever under the leadership of Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan, to say it's about time we reshaped what our sense of obligations are, and we restated them as being about a circle of business executives, business organizations who prioritize people, profit, and planet at the same time, and purpose. Now, but you don't start from, is this going to be profitable? But what you find is it is profitable. So let me just give you a specific example. When I took on the responsibility in KPMG way back in 2008 to persuade this global business in 126 countries that actually adopting an energy consumption reduction program, we set a target at that time of 25% energy reduction by 2010. We achieved, I'm glad to say, 29%. We then went on in our next tranche of another 10%. We achieved another 15%. We saved hundreds of millions of dollars all across, because all of a sudden, the entities and the offices of KPMG around the world woke up to the fact that if they took controls over their lighting structures, energy consumption, and server energy use for powering laptops, computers, and storage systems, and they merged server systems, they were saving money. Now that was driving profit. But you see, if you started with the argument about, look, this is going to increase our profits, we go, nah, that's just do-goodism. But when you do it and you deliver it, you see the energy costs going down. Then the finance director sits up, the chief executive sits up, the people with the investment money sit up. They go, this stuff delivers good. When you can keep and retain people in an organization, we discovered, one of the fascinating things we discovered was that when you lose people year on year and have to re-recruit and bring in new people to refresh the talent base, but you lose them because you either don't treat them the right way, don't motivate them the right way, don't develop them the right way, the cost of the loss on an annual basis was the equivalent of the 6 largest audit accounts the business had. We might as well have just wiped those accounts out. So if you can retain people by developing them, the truth is, and you'll all know this from human resources sources, HR sources, they all say that people leave businesses largely because of the managers who so-called look over them rather than look after them. They generally don't leave because they're drawn somewhere else. Now, of course, there was always exceptions to that, but the culture in an organization is a cash advantage. So the practical reality is energy is a saving, human resources are a saving, and public engagement in responsibility programs is reputation building. Now, if it's reputation building, and of course, recognizing even today that the nature, I never forget that when Paul Polman was chief executive of Unilever, he explained this very simple piece of maths, that the business as a whole, and I'm just going to give you the broad figures as I remember them, this is probably 4 or 5 years ago, the business of Unilever as a whole in 130 countries around the world, one of the biggest corporations on the planet, its market value was roughly 40% greater than its operational value. So what is that gap between operational value, in other words, the things it owns and makes and produces and sells, and its market value, in the same way as, dare I say it, certain electric car products' market value exceeds the product value. That is all about reputation. Well, reputation is one of the greatest intangibles you could possibly ever have. But on the back of that reputation comes the option to raise capital, to borrow on the market, to get low interest, to invest in the development of the business. Profitability comes from responsibility, reputation, quality of people, and purposeful behaviors.
Fantastic. And Michael, could you share a little bit more about your role at KPMG, Global Head of Citizenship? What exactly was that role? And why did KPMG decide that that was an important position to have in terms of global view and social impact?
Well, the interesting thing is, Grant, when I was drawn across, put it that way, nice to say headhunted by the chairman of KPMG, and which was the truth. When I was drawn across from the BBC to KPMG in 2006, there was no job description. There was no role description. There was just an idea. And the idea held by the global chairman and the global chief executive was this. Here is a business which is operating between the public and private sectors. A business which is providing accounting facilities for listed corporations, as well as at the same time providing accounting facilities for public government departments, whether it's in the United States or the United Kingdom, or whether it's in Singapore or it's somewhere in South America. Here is a business operating in the two paradigms. Here is a business that is providing business consulting and development services to advance commercial business, at the same time as providing consulting services to government departments, and those government departments are becoming more efficient and more effective. So when you hold the two together, you realize that for a KPMG, a PwC, a Deloitte, an Accenture, an EY, whichever one of those you want to pick, there is a double duty. It's not just to private, commercial, profitable business with public investments, or some cases just private business. It's also to public, responsible, taxpayer-funded government departments. One of the largest contracts that KPMG, I remember, in Australia held was the Department of Defense. Probably and then after that, the mining corporation. So you've got private mining corporations who are affecting communities very directly, and you've got defense procurements, which is also affecting communities because of the purpose of creation of weapons and the way in which people are deployed. Now, if we're serving all of those different constituencies, the idea was very simple. We need a philosophy of engagement and understanding, an approach which is going to bring credit to the reputation and the value of the business, but it's going to motivate the 130,000 people in the business at the time when I started. It's going to motivate all those people to more than just give time and money. That's kind of like the cheap end of it. Do voluntary activity, provide money. That's the cheap end. How about helping clients to do what is right and appropriate in a way that makes clients more effective? So I'm going to give you a very vivid example. Many of those watching will remember the Rana Plaza disaster in Bangladesh. That was when an 8-story building collapsed as a consequence of the construction of the building being soundly inadequate. At one particular point, 8 floors of electricity generators came on at the same time because the public electricity system was inadequate and was breaking down. The building was not structurally safe. Many well-known and famous brands were producing, from luxury brands right the way through to less expensive product brands, were producing interesting clothing product in the building. And when all of those generators came on at exactly the same time, the building shook itself into fracture and fell. 2,000, mainly women, died. Nearly another 2,000 people lost their limbs, arms and legs, with the collapse of the building slicing their arms off. Devastation across 40,000 people in families affected. And each one of the companies had to decide how they respond. Well, it was one of my duties to go to the leadership of Primark and to speak to them at their request at how they could take on the human rights duty to deal with what had been a catastrophe. And what they chose to do, to their credit, was to be the first business organization to fully compensate every one of the attached families to the people who had died or lost limbs or lost work. Massive, instantaneous, multi-million payouts. No question about it. Secondly, to appoint a senior executive worldwide to ensure that all of the facilities operated by what was then, Associated British Foods, which of course included Primark, that all of their facilities should have building standards regulations of the highest quality embedded in them. Thirdly, to bring in an independent assessor from Forum for the Future, who would assess independently their practices and procedures and reporting structures. And fourthly, to join the UN Global Compact to make themselves accountable as a private business to a public institution. And at that time, they took the primary step, which I have to say brought many other international brands into shame and disgrace because they were dragging their heels. Well, the consequence of Primark doing that was not only the accolade of taking the responsible step possible, and they did exactly the right things that we asked them to do, but what it led to was massive improvement in reputation. And the response that they then subsequently had, more people coming to want to work for them, both in production and in sales. That's the right way to deal with these things, and it's a practical demonstration of how profitability was enhanced by responsibility.
Right. Those are great examples, Lord Hastings. And I wanted to ask you about the personal approach to leadership as well. Obviously, those are corporate responses, but obviously behind every corporation, there's an individual that makes those decisions. So what does a real leader look like today, in your view?
Well, a real leader to me, and I'm going to quote from an article that has appeared in the Harvard Business Review by Hubert Jolly, dated May the 13th, 2021. I'm sure you know Hubert Jolly, former chairman and CEO of Best Buy, senior lecturer at Harvard Business School, and the author with Caroline Lambert of The Heart of Business. Recognized, I'm just reading this because I think it's important you know, recognized as one of the top 100 CEOs in the world by Harvard Business Review, one of the top 30 CEOs in the world by Barron's, one of the top 10 CEOs in the US by Glassdoor. Jolly is now keen to add his voice and his energy to the necessary refoundation of business and capitalism around purpose and people. So he writes this extensive article in the Harvard Business Review about how he structured and restructured Best Buy, that it would deal with people's individual and practical and humane needs. And I'm going to read you, because I don't believe in saying things and pretending that I've written them. I want to read his words as a leader, and you will then see what a leader looks like. He says this: putting people at the center of business means fostering caring and authentic relationships. This should occur within a company, but also within all the company's stakeholders, customers, vendors, local communities, and shareholders, in a way that not only contributes to the company's purpose, but also creates great outcomes for each of them. The corporations that will thrive coming out of the pandemic are those that will treat customers as human beings with needs, not walking wallets. They will connect and collaborate with vendors as partners, benefiting both sides and serving customers. They'll contribute to their communities in a way that aligns with their noble purposes. They'll reject the view of shareholders as soulless and obsessed with short-term profits at all costs. This shift in investor mindsets, still in process and led by BlackRock CEO Larry Fink, prioritizes investing in companies that care about their impact on the environment and their communities, and it reinforces the belief that purpose and people and planet are at the heart of successful, sustainable business. The companies that will thrive will refuse to see the world as a zero-sum game. They will choose and instead of or. It won't always be easy. There is a temptation to simply greenwash and say you're sustainable, not behave that way. Leaders must resist this temptation and serve stakeholders in word and deed. There you have it.
Perfect. So we have a lot of executives and CEOs on the call today who are listening to us and thinking, yes, that is the correct way. I'd like to push my business and my leadership style. Can you give us 3 practical tips on where people can start this journey today?
All right, so this is hugely important. I came into KPMG at the behest of the chairman and the chief executive at a global level to work with the senior partners and leaders of the 120 countries around the world. It's vital that if there is a chief executive or a leader of a business or a finance director who's watching this thinking, what do I do about this? It is not to hand it on to someone else to create the vision and then hope they make good with it. It is for you to own that vision. You may well have an executive like me whose day-to-day job is to implement the things you have agreed, but it is your duty as the boss to get up to speed with planet and purpose realities. No one can sit around today in 2021 and say, I don't understand the climate crisis. You've got to think, which rock have you been hiding under for the last 10 years, if not 20? So get out and understand the straight reality of sustainable and environmental duty. Just get the facts, and get the facts of the world crisis, but the facts of your business responsibility. Get to understand what it has meant to actually take on board that responsibility to change the business. So that's the first thing I say. The chief executive must own it. The second thing they must do is they must look at the operational cost realities that sustainability brings. Now, that includes how do you enhance the reputation of the business in the intangibles, so those dimensions of the business which prove to be effective at public reputation enhancements, but how do you also add, or rather reduce the cost of the business by putting in environmental sustainability processes like energy consumption controls, server controls, and of course, responsible use of fuel and travel. That way you are enhancing the finance base of the business, and you're taking charge of that, but you're also at the same time realizing that by shifting the gear towards reputational added value, you're adding to the outcome profitability of the business. That's the second thing you need to do, is own it, first of all, and understand it. Secondly, look at the metrics. And the third thing is, you've got to be the enthusiast who runs the course throughout the business, actively advocating across the business that this is not a social good. This is a fundamental business operation. This is going to change the value of the business in some ways by, let's be candid, paying a living wage to people who are currently earning less than that is going to cost. By equalizing the pay between men and women, we all know that the gender pay gaps have revealed that women are somewhere between 10 to 16% on average paid less than men. Don't sit there debating that. Equalize it. That means either cut the men's pay or cut the boss's pay. But you have to somehow balance it out so that you get justice. And then you've got to say, well, if women are not treated fairly, who else is not treated fairly in remuneration? Generally, it's people from different ethnic cultures, if it's in the United States or the UK, Europe. Put it this way, northern cultures, people of different ethnic hues are disparately paid less. Equalize it. Do things which show dignity. Now, that's how you hang on to people. So the simple steps are very clear. Know about the planet, the climate, the reality, sustainable truth, business operations. No one can say they don't know about electric vehicles these days, so that gets energy consumption right into the heart of business thinking. Know about that. Secondly, look at the metrics and how you can improve and enhance them. And thirdly, understand how best to support and value and motivate your people. And that's always going to come. I mean, having training courses that talk about sustainability is not particularly wise if you're not paying women the same as men, if you're not paying Black and Asian people the same as the white people. Come on. There are practical realities here. So this is what a chief executive can do. Say, I've had it with differentials and we've had it with debate. We're just going to get on it and do it.
Fantastic. Lord Hastings, I know we're pressed for time, and I would like to move on now. Thank you so much for those amazing insights. We're going to move into the breakthrough group shortly, and I would like to ask Michael to summarize at the end of our session after we've come back from the breakthrough groups. There'll be an opportunity to hear more from Lord Hastings in about 30 minutes. I would now just like to move on to introduction to Peter Harper, who's the director of the Real Leaders Impact Collaborative, who will be giving some more information about that and priming us for our breakthrough groups. Peter?
Thanks, Grant. And thanks, Lord Michael Hastings. That was wonderful. So Lord Hastings will join us in our breakthrough groups shortly, but first let me give you a brief overview. This Meet the Real Leaders series is brought to you by the Real Leaders Impact Collaborative. And in the collaborative, we curate diverse peer advisory groups of 6 to 10 impact CEOs in each group, and we Zoom once a month. So we work together to address each member's most pressing challenge or opportunity in a confidential environment. And if you'd like to learn more about these impact collaborative groups, please just type info, I-N-F-O, in the chat now. Just as a reminder, that you'll need to keep your video on, please, to participate in the breakthrough room. So if you don't have a video connection, please log off now, and we hope to see you next month. If there is a member of the Real Leaders team in your room, they will help facilitate the conversation. Otherwise, we ask the first person in the room be the timekeeper and the moderator, and please be sure everyone gets a turn. So do a little math, if you would, please, and divide the number of attendees in your room by 20 minutes to determine speaking time for each member. So your group will have a total of 20 minutes, and you want to take your time to answer 3 specific questions. Share your name, location, organization, and your impact goal. Share what current social impact strategy you have in your business with your group. And share one idea from Lord Hastings' talk that struck you and how you could apply it to your business. When everyone has shared their thoughts, and if time allows, feel free to share ways that you might collaborate with each other.
Great, thank you, Peter. And before we go into the breakthrough groups, I would just like to get everyone warmed up for their discussions by introducing James Rosebush. He is an extraordinary speech maker, and he's going to give us how to elevate your voice in 60 seconds. James?
Thank you, Grant. And I have to say the Lord Hastings certainly surpassed anything that I'm going to be able to tell you right now. He was on fire with his subject. And that's what we have to do. Today, so many corporate leaders are losing their jobs because although they may be committed to sustainability, they can't communicate it. And of course, that comes from the heart, and it comes from your own personal story. So now I'm going to give you 5 tips in 1 minute about how to be a more effective presenter of your commitment to sustainability and all the issues that we're concerned about and we'll be discussing today in these breakout rooms. But first, a great thanks to Lord Hastings for being the demonstrator of this kind of commitment and communicating it so brilliantly. So number 1, tell a story. Right out of the pack, you must begin by telling a story. And why is that? Because it creates a bond between you and the audience. And if you say to me, well, I'm not a great storyteller, James, I don't really know how to tell stories. I always say, tell someone else's stories. Tell a story that you've read about. Lord Hastings read a fabulous quote from the Harvard Business Review. So you can do that, and then that creates a bond as well. So number 1, tell a story. Number 2, tear down the 4th wall of partition. What is that? So if you're an actor or performer on stage, you have a wall behind you, you have stage right, you have stage left. People don't often recognize that there's a wall in front of you. And what is that? That's the wall of resistance from your audience. People may come and they may be tired. They may want to be anywhere but listening to you. They may be on their phones. They may be doing anything but wanting to be receptive. So how do you tear down that wall? First of all, you have to come into your presentation feeling that you are united and you're at one with your audience. There is no real division. You're all in one consciousness. You're all trying to uncover and unpack and grow in the same way. So break down any kind of division or resistance you may feel in your own consciousness about your audience. That's number 2. That's tearing down the wall of resistance. You may not see it, but you will feel it. Tear it down. Number 3, the result of tearing down this resistance, this wall of resistance, is building a bridge. In order to communicate, you have to be walking across a bridge, but you have to build it first. So you have to have a relationship with that audience, which means you have to come on stage caring about the audience. So this is very true, as Lord Hastings also mentioned, that you have to be a CEO or a leader that's more concerned and interested in your constituents and your employees than you are in yourself. Why? Because if you want to effectively communicate and mobilize the troops in your own company, then they have to feel that they can communicate back with you. That is a bridge that goes both ways. Number 4, inspire your audience with a quote. Again, Lord Hastings did a fabulous job with that as well. So why do you want to do that? Because if you bring in authorities that are perhaps taken more seriously or have more experience or have more credentials than you do, you're showing that you appreciate these authorities and these people who have accomplished these. Sometimes you're quoting from someone who's a child. Sometimes you're quoting from someone who's been, been involved in some kind of untoward experiences that you can use as an inspiring lever to get people really committed to something. So making this quote from these kinds of people are critically important. Ronald Reagan, the president that I worked for, never left a speech without drawing on the prophets, the great people who were founders of various countries. And by the way, had nothing to do with partisan politics, but he would use people and what they thought to inspire an audience. And lastly, remember that if you're fearful, and so many people that I coach and I work with will say, well, I couldn't do that because I'm afraid of that. Well, remember, fire melts fear. Your conviction, your energy, and your commitment to a cause is what totally melts the fear. So when you're more interested in a cause than you are in yourself, all of that self-consciousness and that self-absorption that is really the fear goes away. Martin Luther King was a wonderful example of and sharing with us how he got rid of fear in his own life. And you'd have to think, well, how could someone like Dr. King be fearful? He was a minister, he was a preacher, and he stood up and did it in a magnificent way. But he talks about his own fear, and he certainly had plenty to fear on the outside. He conquered his fear through faith, and he conquered his fear through conviction. So these are my 5 tips. I'm your entertainment for today. Tell a story, tear down the fourth wall of a partition, build a bridge to your audience, inspire with a quote, and remember, fire melts fear.
James, thank you. That was fantastic. I'm sure we're all fired up for the discussion now. So we're going to move straight into the breakthrough groups, and we'll come back for Lord Michael Hastings to summarize at the end. Welcome back, everybody, from the breakthrough groups. I hope you all had meaningful and productive discussions. Lord Hastings needs to leave us soon, so I'm going to ask him quickly just to summarize today's discussion and any additional thoughts from his breakthrough group that he was involved in.
Thanks very much, Grant. And I do apologize. I have to skip off quickly. Another Zoom beginning in a matter of 3 minutes. So let me just summarize by quoting back again from Robert Jolly, who in the conclusion of his article, and then I'm going to read your final quote. He says, "It is past time that we as leaders acknowledge that our role has changed in 3 fundamental ways. 1, it is no longer simply about maximizing shareholder value. It is about maximizing a positive difference in the world. 2, the job of leaders is to maximize performance, not by choosing amongst stakeholders, but by embracing, mobilizing, and serving all of them in line with a noble purpose and refusing zero-sum games along the way. 3, the purposeful human organization cannot flourish with a traditional top-down model of the powerful and infallible hero leader driven by power, fame, glory, or money. What is required now is a leadership approach that puts purpose and people at the heart of business. This is how, together, we can begin to reinvent capitalism so it contributes to a more sustainable future."
Fantastic.
And I know you're all wonderfully, sorry.
I just wanted to ask you, I know you need to leave soon. How can we help you? We've got all these CEOs and executives today. How can they reach out to you? How can they best support your endeavors?
Well, I would say help me by you being fantastic, putting into practice these ideas and principles. Go do it. Don't discuss it anymore. No time. I remember very clearly, and I finished with this, when I was in front of the board of KPMG, and the chairman of KPMG said to me, "But Michael, where is the business plan for this?" And I said, "There isn't a business plan. There's an obligation." And then somebody said, "Oh, so if there's an obligation, why should we do it?" And I said, "Because we can." And they said, "Oh, in that case, go and do it." That's the approach you need. Don't debate it, go do it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. So as a reminder, I'd just like to remind everyone to apply to join the Real Leaders Impact Collaborative. It's a confidential advisory group. You will have discussions similar to what we had today in a confidential environment with other executives. And I'd like to thank everyone for being a part of the Real Leaders community today. And I hope you're feeling inspired enough to go out and make a positive difference in the world, while still making it profitable, of course. I'd like to ask you all to join me again next month in June when I speak with Jack Sim. He's a Singapore-based founder of the Bottom of the Pyramid Hub, and he will be joining Meet the Real Leaders to discuss his recent completion of a World Trade Center for the Poor in Singapore. He believes the greatest business opportunities lie within communities with the greatest needs. And he will be sharing with us the $1 trillion market opportunities at the bottom of the pyramid. Later this year, you can also look forward to Raja Rajamanar, the Chief Marketing Officer of MasterCard. We'll be speaking to Dr. Nancy O'Reilly on the power of diversity in building a successful business. And then on the 28th of July, iconic environmentalist Dr. Jane Goodall will join us to talk about why good for the environment is good for business. Please join us on our social media platforms. Subscribe to our global magazine and podcast, where you can find more inspirational leadership advice. Once again, thanks to everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again next month.